Warhol, in his own words, would go up to men, like if he just met you or if he met me, he'd say, "Let me draw your cock." Like almost as soon as he said hello. And I felt like, wow, this is an artist who was often later seen as asexual. And in the 1950s, he's going, I mean, these were virtually all what we would now call gay men, but still, like if someone said that to me after saying, like, "Hi, how are you feeling today? You know, do you want a cup of coffee? Let me draw your cock." I would be a little taken aback. So it seems very Warholian somehow.
Yeah.
And in the article, I sort of say it's as though he's skipping the small talk and going to what he's really thinking.
My name is Alex Jovanovich, and I'm a senior editor of Artforum. I am absolutely delighted and honored to have with me today scholar and curator Richard Meyer, the Robert and Ruth Halperin Professor in Art History at Stanford University, for this edition of Artforum's Under the Cover video series. For the February 2025 issue, Richard contributed an essay titled Double Vision, in which he discusses the exhibition Andy Warhol, Velvet Rage and Beauty, staged at the Neue Nationalgalerie in Berlin and organized by the museum's director, Klaus Biesenbach, with Lisa Botti. On the cover of the February issue, we have Warhol's 1982 photograph, The Wrestlers, which you discuss in your essay. Could you tell our viewers what it was about the work that caught your interest?
So I guess first I should make clear that the photograph is of this ancient sculpture of these naked men wrestling, but it's of a modern copy of a 19th century copy of a Roman copy of an ancient Greek, now lost sculpture. So it's quite homoerotic, I would say, especially from the position which Warhol has photographed the sculpture, which is from behind one of the asses, behind the buttocks. What really struck me was that the photograph, which is not huge, is on this huge marble monolith. And they're not meant for the hanging of art. You can't really hang art on marble. I loved this idea that the photograph was in the wrong place, like the place where art shouldn't be. And Warhol was photographing the sculpture from the wrong queer perspective. And so I love that Artforum. I have to say, I never expected that Artforum would put on the cover not a Warhol, but a curatorial gesture that I think further queers Warhol. And by queer, I also mean queer in that older sense, which I talk about in terms of disorienting and out of the ordinary and strange. Like it's literally strange that this photograph is on the marble wall.
Well, something else I wanted to add regarding the cover, I thought it was a very unconventional choice, and when I first saw it, I had no idea it was Warhol. When I look at this, I think of, it's 1962, Palm Springs, Roy Carver's fabulous winter apartment, and in his foyer, he has this great, to me, to my mind, to my imagination, it addresses this whole sort of antebellum homosexuality sort of style, pre-Stonewall in terms of antebellum. And that's what I think is just kind of so brilliant about it. But I wonder at this show, since it was such a remarkable collection of all of his, more sexually explicit erotic work, were there any pieces there that A, you had never seen before, or B, that you'd seen before, but in the context of the show, kind of hit you differently, struck you differently?
Yeah, definitely. So there's this series now called Torsos that started with male nudes. There's a few female nudes in it, importantly, but occasionally. And one of the things that I talk about in the piece that I kind of love is Warhol in his diary is saying, "Oh, I'm doing these male nudes, but we shouldn't call them nudes. Let's call them landscapes." And then they actually refer to them as landscapes. But then later, Warhol also refers to them as, the cocks, cunts, and assholes. But I think it was almost like a parody of having to closet something. And so landscapes became their code for all these guys that were coming to get naked and be photographed. But when I saw them together, I realized, wow, this is really about exhibitionism. I didn't get that before. And then the other part was that the torsos lead directly to the sex series, which is by the most explicit series that Warhol ever does, which he himself never showed and never sold. It seems to me that what Warhol is doing is really thinking a lot about the relation between I'm going to show this explicit form in the sex series or the naked bodies, but what am I going to do with it aesthetically? It weirdly goes back to landscapes. Like maybe he was thinking, like I'm going to do, I'm going to think about
of all
it.
Those surrealists who made landscapes of women's bodies.
Right.
I mean, there's certainly a lineage in thought.
But I do talk about how the geometric shards or forms, it sometimes does from a distance create abstraction.
Something I want to discuss in regards to the title of the show. It takes its title from Alan Downs' 2005 self-help manual, The Velvet Rage, Overcoming the Pain of Growing Up Gay in a Straight Man's World. In your text, you briefly describe the book as a guide that helps gay men, quote, move from shame to authenticity, from submerged rage to self-acceptance. But in relation to Warhol, you say, this would seem an ill-fitting narrative for the artist who questioned the idea of authentic individuality. And there is barely a hint of rage, velvet or otherwise, in Warhol's work. Though I wonder if Warhol's famously deadpan affect, which we were talking about earlier, in both his art and the way he presented himself, is a kind of sublimated rage, that mirror-like quality that a lot of people ascribe to him, a tool that helped him reflect and deflect other people's perceptions of him, which also happened to inspire a lot of rage in others.
I think that Warhol always had shame about his body. He was a sickly child. He had this St. Vitus dance, I think it's called. His skin was an issue, his hair, he had plastic surgery on his nose, and he was very interested in beauty, to which he never felt that he could conform. So I do and obviously that would also inflect his sexual, he wasn't sexually confident. And I think it inflected his social, the way he used the camera to sort of hide. He always, in the 70s, had the camera with him, but it was a way of mediating. He was there at the party, but kind of not.
It's also kind of beautiful by proxy. If I'm next to, Angelica Houston, if I'm next to this person, if I put them on the cover, therefore I'm in a way beautiful too, because I made that happen.
I will say that one thing I really appreciated, this is collective rage rather than individual, but in the show, on either side, before you entered, there was this timeline, and it was both what was going on in the US and what was going on in Germany in terms of the criminalization of homosexuality and then like in '69 the Stonewall riots, but also what was going on in Warhol's, so he'd being shot in '67. But more the point is for me, Velvet Rage could stand for the history and the changes in the work. Klaus Biesenbach talks about in the catalog, which itself is a series of interviews, not essays, with different Warhol experts. He talks about when he first started going out in Berlin, homosexuality was still officially illegal. And I remember, the sodomy, sodomy was officially illegal when I was sort of just getting out of college. And these things do create shame, I think. And so I actually thought, let me put it this way, that there was some overcoming of shame on the curatorial level, as that the show itself was an overcoming of shame, especially when Klaus told me he couldn't do this show in the US, and he doesn't know that he could do it anywhere else, maybe in Western Europe. I was really surprised by that. Although not now. I'm not surprised today.
Definitely not now.
He said this to me a few weeks before the election, and I was just convinced for some weird reason that a very different thing was going to happen in the election.
You're currently working on a book titled Andy Warhol's Guide to Everyday Life. Would you mind giving us a glimpse into what the book's about?
It never occurred to me until recently to ask myself, why? Why do I keep returning to this artist? I think the reasons have to do with his sensibility and the off-kilter way he viewed the world. And so I've always been really interested in everything I write, including this, in quoting, having Warhol's voice, like even "Let me draw your cock," or we shouldn't call them nudes, we should call them landscapes. There's this sensibility that's so, I don't like, the word unique is very weird to put with Warhol, who questioned the whole idea of uniqueness, but it's very specific, and it's really taught me a lot. For example, when I started going to seriously to museums as an art history major in college and then in grad school, I never thought about storage. I never realized, 97% of the work is not on display. And what is that work, and why is it not on? And what does inferior mean? What does damaged mean? What does duplicate mean? And then when I learned about Raid the Icebox, where Warhol curated this show where he put everything in storage, that just completely transformed my sense of high art and going to museums. And now I always think, what are they not showing at me? And it's taken me all these decades of working on Warhol to realize if I truly want to understand or speak in a way with or to Warhol, I need to stop footnoting, like theorizing. I need to stop writing as a PhD, whatever, deed, credentialized art historian, and start listening to what he said and looking at what he looked at. So that's what the book is. So there's just one quote that I wanted to read before.
Please.
Okay, so Warhol goes with Victor Hugo to a porn shop in 1977, and he says, we went for research materials about landscapes. Even in his diary, he's using landscapes, in quote marks, landscapes. Bought a fairy shirt, that's in quote marks too, so I think that's what it was called. A fairy shirt that has my name on it. It's just a list of names of people who are gay all over it, like Thoreau, Alexander the Great, Halston, me, but they had Richard Avedon on it. And there was someone on it who I never heard of, who I never heard was queer either, but I forget who. And what I love about that is, okay, there's some porno shop that's selling a fairy t-shirt with Warhol's name. It has Avedon, and why is Avedon, like because he photographs Dovima and an elephant? Is that why, he's a, but also when Warhol says they had somebody whose name I never heard of, it's sort of like that gayness is about what you hear, who you rumor, and then this t-shirt becomes like a form of, well, here are our progenitors, here are our, forefathers. I don't know if Thoreau was gay. It doesn't even make sense to use the word gay for, but I just love the idea of Warhol. He buys the shirt that has his name and Halston's name and someone he doesn't remember. It just seems to be like such a different view of Warhol and gay culture. Also consumerism, because he writes how much the shirt costs, and also they buy porn magazines. He always writes how much everything costs. But that moment, these moments of everyday life for Warhol, where he's going for research materials for the landscapes and finds this fairy shirt, it seems to be so revealing about not the persona he projected or the persona that necessarily might be extracted from the work, but this lived complexity.